Most people who take their own lives were convinced, until their final hour, that life had meaning. And most people who defend life with passion cannot tell you why it is worth defending. This is the central paradox of human existence. We act as though life matters, yet we cannot justify it. We build, we love, we suffer, all without a foundation beneath us. Some call this faith. I call it something else, the absurd. And once you see it clearly, once the veil drops, and you stand face to face with this contradiction, you have only two honest paths. One leads to the void. The other, the one I have chosen, leads to a kind of freedom you cannot imagine. Let me be direct with you. You are watching this because something inside you has begun to question, perhaps not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like a hairline fracture in glass. You have looked around at the rituals of your life, the routines you perform, the hopes you cling to, and you have felt something give way. Maybe it happened in a moment of exhaustion, or in the middle of a conversation where everyone was laughing, but you suddenly felt absent, distant, like an actor who forgot his lines. Maybe it came when someone you loved died, and all the comforting words people offered felt hollow, empty, like coins thrown into a well with no bottom. Whatever brought you here, I want you to know this: I will not comfort you. I will not tell you that everything happens for a reason, that your suffering has a purpose, that the universe is secretly on your side. I will not offer you hope in the traditional sense, hope that tomorrow will be better, that meaning will arrive if you just wait long enough, that God or history or love will save you. These are the very illusions that have led you to this moment of crisis, but I will offer you something else, something more valuable than hope. I will offer you lucidity, the clear, cold, unflinching ability to see things as they are. And within that lucidity, I will show you a freedom that most people never experience, because most people are too afraid to look directly at the truth of their existence. The problem most people face is that they build their entire lives on a promise, the promise that life has inherent meaning. They tell themselves that if they work hard enough, love deeply enough, believe strongly enough, then one day it will all make sense. One day the pieces will fit together. One day they will understand why they suffered, why they struggled, why they kept going. They postpone actually living in favor of waiting for this revelation that never comes. And when it doesn't come, when they reach middle age or old age and realize that no cosmic explanation has appeared, that the universe has remained stubbornly silent, that their questions have gone unanswered, they collapse. Some into despair, some into frantic distraction, some into bitterness, and some, yes, into death. But there is another way, a way that requires courage, but offers something that hope never can: genuine presence. The freedom to live fully and intensely without needing the universe to validate your existence. This is what I want to teach you today. Not how to find meaning, but how to live magnificently without it. This video is different from anything else you will encounter, because it does not try to solve the problem of meaninglessness. It accepts it. It begins where most philosophies end, at the recognition that the universe is fundamentally indifferent. And from this recognition, it builds something new. Not a consolation, but a rebellion. Not a retreat, but an advance. I am going to teach you what it means to embrace the absurd. Not as a defeat, but as the very foundation of your freedom. And to do this, I need to first show you what the absurd actually is. Not in abstract terms, but in lived experience. In moments you have already felt but perhaps did not have words for. Think about a time when you performed a routine task, brushing your teeth, commuting to work, eating dinner, and suddenly became aware of the strangeness of it all. The mechanical nature of your movements, the arbitrary quality of your goals. You looked at yourself from the outside, as though watching a stranger, and you thought, why am I doing this? What is the point of any of this? This moment of dislocation, this sudden sense of being a stranger in your own life. This is the beginning of absurd consciousness. Or think about standing at a funeral, hearing people speak of the deceased in past tense, as though they were just a story now, just a memory. And you realize with terrible clarity that this will happen to you, that everyone you know will one day speak of you in past tense, that all your struggles, all your achievements, all the things you worried about and worked for will dissolve into nothing. The universe will continue exactly as it did before you existed. This recognition, this confrontation with your own mortality and the indifference of the world, this too is the absurd. The absurd is not a feeling of sadness. It is not depression or nihilism. It is something more precise. It is the divorce between our human need for meaning and the world's refusal to provide it. We want answers. We want to understand why we are here, what we should do, what happens after we die. We crave these answers with every fiber of our being, and the universe gives us only silence. This confrontation between our desire for clarity and the world's impenetrable mystery is what I call the absurd. Now, most people, when they encounter this feeling, try to escape it immediately. They reach for distraction. They throw themselves into work, into relationships, into entertainment, into anything that will make them stop thinking. Or they reach for faith. They tell themselves a story about God, or destiny, or cosmic justice that makes the silence bearable. Or they convince themselves that they haven't looked hard enough, that meaning is out there somewhere if they just search more diligently. But all of these responses are forms of evasion. They are attempts to avoid the confrontation, rather than to live through it. And I want to tell you why this evasion, though understandable, is a betrayal of your own consciousness. You see, the moment you become aware of the absurd is actually the moment you become most fully human. It is the moment your consciousness recognizes itself for what it is. A light shining in darkness, a voice calling out into emptiness, a question that will never be answered. Most animals do not have this problem. They do not lie awake wondering why they exist. They simply exist. But you have been cursed and blessed with awareness. You cannot go back to unconsciousness. You can only move forward into greater lucidity or sideways into comfortable lies. And here is where the central question emerges. The question that I spent years wrestling with. The question that nearly destroyed me before it liberated me. If life has no inherent meaning, if the universe is fundamentally indifferent, if consciousness is merely an accident in a cold cosmos, then why not end it? Why not simply conclude that the whole enterprise is pointless and opt out? This is not a rhetorical question. This is not a thought experiment. This is the most serious philosophical problem we face. Because every morning when you wake up, you are making a choice. You are choosing to continue. And if you cannot explain why you make that choice, if it is based only on habit or fear or vague hope, then you are not truly living. You are only delaying the inevitable question. So let me tell you what I discovered. I discovered that suicide, far from being the logical response to the absurd, is actually its opposite. It is an escape from the absurd rather than an acceptance of it. Let me explain why. The absurd, as I have described it, consists of three elements: a conscious human being who desires meaning, a silent universe that provides none, and the confrontation between these two realities. Remove any one of these elements, and the absurd disappears. If you eliminate consciousness through suicide, you destroy the very thing that makes the absurd possible. You are like a player who flips the game board because they do not like the rules. It is not a solution. It is a surrender. The truly absurd response is not to flee the confrontation but to maintain it. To stand in that tension between meaning and meaninglessness and refuse to blink. To say, yes, life is absurd. Yes, the universe is silent. Yes, everything I do will ultimately dissolve into nothing, and yet I choose to live. Not because I have found meaning, but precisely because I have not. This is what I call revolt. Revolt is not anger. It is not bitterness or resentment. It is a clear-eyed, lucid refusal to accept the terms that the universe offers. It is saying, I know I will die. I know everything is temporary. I know there is no cosmic purpose, but I will not let this knowledge destroy me. Instead, I will live with full intensity precisely because nothing matters except what I choose to care about. This is the freedom I promised you. Not the freedom that comes from finding answers, but the freedom that comes from no longer needing them. Once you stop waiting for the universe to give you permission to live, once you stop searching for some external validation of your existence, you discover that you have been free all along. You have simply been enslaved by your own need for reassurance. But I realize I am speaking abstractly, and abstract ideas alone do not change lives. So let me give you something concrete. Let me tell you about a man I once imagined. A man in a prison cell, hours away from execution. He knows he will die tomorrow morning. There is no hope of escape, no hope of pardon. The future has collapsed to a single point. And in that collapse, something strange happens. For the first time in years, perhaps in his entire life, this man becomes fully present. He notices things he has never noticed before. The exact shape of the shadow that the window bars cast on the floor. The texture of the stone wall, rough and cold beneath his fingertips. The taste of the bread they bring him for his final meal, how it is both ordinary and extraordinary, both mundane and precious. The sound of his own breathing. He is not thinking about tomorrow, because tomorrow no longer exists in any meaningful way. He is not thinking about yesterday, because the past cannot save him. He exists only in this moment, in this cell, in this body that will soon cease to be. And in that absolute presence, stripped of hope, stripped of future, stripped of all illusions, he encounters something unexpected. Not despair, but a kind of completeness, a kind of clarity. This is what I want you to understand. You do not need to be condemned to death to experience this. The absurd offers you the same gift every morning if you are willing to look. You are already condemned. Not to execution tomorrow, but to mortality someday. The only difference between you and the man in the cell is that you have been lying to yourself about it. You have been pretending that the future is infinite, that meaning will arrive eventually, that you have time to figure it all out. But what if you stopped pretending? What if you accepted, truly accepted, that your time is limited, that meaning will not arrive, that this moment right now, as you listen to these words, is all you actually have? What would change? I will tell you what would change. Everything. The way you taste your coffee in the morning, the way you look at the people you love, the way you move through your day. Because once you stop postponing life until conditions are ideal, once you stop waiting for some future moment of revelation, you are forced to confront the reality that life is here. Now, in all its imperfect, temporary, unredeemable glory. The condemned man in the cell has no choice but to be present. But you have a choice. You can continue to live as though you have forever, as though meaning is waiting for you around some corner, as though your existence will be justified eventually. Or you can choose to live as the condemned man lives in his final hours, with absolute attention, absolute presence, absolute appreciation for what is. This is not morbid, this is not depressing. This is the most life-affirming realization possible. Because it frees you from the tyranny of future and past. It returns you to the only place where life actually happens. The present moment. Now let me tell you another story. A very old story that you probably know, but which I want you to hear differently. The story of Sisyphus. You remember the myth. Sisyphus was condemned by the gods to roll a boulder up a mountain, only to watch it roll back down, and then to repeat this task for eternity. no progress, no achievement, no end. Philosophers have traditionally seen this as the ultimate symbol of futility, of meaningless labor, of cosmic punishment, and they have pitied Sisyphus. But I do not pity him. In fact, I want you to imagine Sisyphus happy. Imagine him at the bottom of the mountain, watching the rock he has just pushed to the summit come tumbling back down. In that pause before he begins again, what does he think? Does he despair? Does he curse the gods? Does he wish for death? No. In that moment, Sisyphus is the most free man in the universe, because he has accepted, fully and completely, the absurdity of his situation. He knows the rock will roll down. He knows he will push it up again. He knows this will continue forever. And in knowing this, in seeing it with absolute clarity, he is no longer deceived. He is no longer hoping for the rock to stay at the top. He is no longer waiting for the gods to relent. He is simply choosing, moment by moment, to continue. And in that choice lies his entire freedom. You see, the gods thought they were punishing Sisyphus, but what they actually did was give him the clearest possible demonstration of the human condition. We are all pushing rocks up mountains. We are all engaged in tasks that will ultimately prove futile. We build careers that will end. We form relationships that will dissolve through death if not before. We create works of art that will be forgotten. We raise children who will die. We struggle and suffer and achieve, and all of it will be erased. The rock always rolls down. But here is what the gods did not understand. The act of pushing the rock is everything. Not the summit, not the achievement, not the lasting legacy. The act itself, the feeling of the stone against your hands, the strain of your muscles, the knowledge that you chose this, that despite knowing how it will end, you chose to begin again. This is what Sisyphus teaches us, that happiness and the absurd are inseparable. You do not find joy despite meaninglessness. You find it within it, because once you abandon the illusion that the rock should stay at the summit, once you stop demanding that your labor have eternal significance, you are free to appreciate the labor itself. Think about your own life. Think about the tasks you perform every day. Cooking meals that will be eaten and forgotten. Cleaning spaces that will become dirty again. Having conversations that will not be remembered. Working at jobs that will continue after you are gone. From the outside, from the perspective of eternity, all of this is absurd. None of it matters in the cosmic scheme of things. But from the inside, from the perspective of your own lived experience, it is everything. The taste of the meal you cooked, the satisfaction of a clean room, the connection you felt during that conversation, the skill you developed at your work. These things do not need to matter to the universe in order to matter to you. In fact, they matter more precisely because they do not have cosmic significance. Because you chose to care about them anyway. Sisyphus is happy because he has understood this, because he has stopped asking the gods to make his labor meaningful and has instead decided to make it meaningful himself, through the act of choosing it. And you can do the same. You can look at the rock rolling down the mountain of your life and say, yes, I see this. I see that nothing lasts. I see that the universe does not care. And I will push the rock up again anyway, not because I am a fool, not because I am in denial, but because I am Sisyphus, and I am free. But understanding this in myth is not the same as living it. So let me give you one more story. A story about a doctor during a plague. Imagine a city that has been struck by a terrible disease. People are dying by the thousands. The hospitals are overwhelmed. The streets are empty except for the ambulances and the carts collecting corpses. And in the middle of this catastrophe stands a doctor. His name does not matter. What matters is that every day he wakes up and goes to work. He treats patients knowing that many of them will die anyway. He takes precautions against the disease knowing that he might contract it himself. He works until exhaustion, day after day, week after week. Why does he do this? Does he believe he can defeat the plague? No, he knows the disease will eventually run its course or kill everyone, and his efforts are just a temporary intervention. Does he believe God is watching and will reward him? No, he has no such assurance. Does he believe history will remember him as a hero? No. Most likely his name will be forgotten within a generation. So why does he continue? Because it is the human thing to do. Because people are suffering, and he has the ability to reduce that suffering, however temporarily. Because the alternative to stay home, to protect himself, to let others die without witness or care, is unacceptable to his consciousness. Not because it violates some cosmic law, but because it violates his sense of what it means to be human. This doctor represents what I call the absurd hero. He acts without guarantee. He works without the promise of success. He cares without the assurance that caring matters in the grand scheme of things. And in this action without guarantee, he demonstrates the highest form of human freedom and dignity. You see, most people need to believe their actions have ultimate meaning before they act. They need to know that their sacrifice will be rewarded, that their efforts will succeed, that their suffering has a purpose. And when they cannot find this assurance, they become paralyzed. They retreat into cynicism or despair. They say, if nothing matters, why do anything? But the absurd hero answers differently. He says, nothing matters, except what I choose to matter. The universe may be indifferent, but I am not. And this capacity to care, to act, to choose, in the absence of cosmic reassurance, this is what makes us human. This is what separates us from the stones and stars. The doctor during the plague does not need God to tell him to heal the sick. He does not need philosophy to explain why suffering should be reduced. He sees a person in pain, and his consciousness responds. This is enough. Not because it changes anything ultimate, but because it changes something immediate and real. And this applies to your life as well. You do not need to solve the problem of cosmic meaning before you decide how to live. You do not need to know whether the universe has a purpose before you choose what to care about. You simply need to be honest about what you actually value when you strip away all the stories and justifications. Do you value love? Then love. Even though every relationship ends. Do you value creating? Then create. Even though your creations will not last. Do you value helping others? Then help. Even though suffering will continue. Do you value beauty? Then seek it. Even though beauty fades. Do these things not because they matter to the universe, but because they matter to you. And let that be enough. This is what the plague doctor teaches us. That action does not require metaphysical justification. That solidarity with other human beings does not need God, or history, or progress to validate it. That you can choose to care about something simply because you choose it. And that choice itself is the source of meaning. Now, I want to step back from stories and speak to you more directly about what all of this implies. About what it means to live absurdly, in practical terms. Because I have given you images and parables, but now you need principles. You need to understand the logic of what I am proposing so that you can apply it to your own situation. First, let us be absolutely clear about what the absurd is and what it is not. The absurd is not nihilism. Nihilism says nothing matters, therefore do nothing. The absurd says nothing matters inherently, therefore you are free to decide what matters. Nihilism is passive, resigned, dead. The absurd is active, rebellious, alive. The absurd is not depression. Depression is a psychological state where you lose the ability to feel or care. The absurd is a philosophical recognition that requires the full presence of your consciousness. In fact, the absurd demands that you be more alive, more present, more engaged than ever before. because you are no longer living in service to some imagined future meaning. You are living here, now, for its own sake. The absurd is not cynicism. The cynic says everything is a game, nothing is real, all values are arbitrary, so why take anything seriously? The absurd says values are indeed constructed rather than discovered, but that makes them more important, not less, because you are responsible for creating them. The absurd is not relativism. It does not say all choices are equal or that nothing can be judged. It says that in the absence of cosmic standards, you must create your own standards based on what your consciousness recognizes as worthy of commitment. And these standards are real and binding precisely because you chose them without being forced to by the universe. So what is the absurd? It is the recognition that we exist in a universe that does not explain itself, that we ask why and receive only silence, that we desire permanence and get only transience, that we seek meaning and find only matter. This recognition, held clearly and without illusion, is absurd consciousness. And once you have this consciousness, once the veil has been lifted, you cannot go back. You cannot unlearn what you have learned. You cannot force yourself to believe comforting lies. You can only choose how to respond. And here is where the question of suicide emerges again, but with new clarity. When I say suicide is not the answer to the absurd, I am not making a moral argument. I am making a logical one. The absurd consists of the confrontation between consciousness and the world. Suicide destroys consciousness. Therefore, suicide destroys one of the terms that makes the absurd possible. It is like answering a question by erasing the questioner. It solves nothing. It simply evades the problem. But there is another kind of suicide that is even more insidious. I call it philosophical suicide. This is when you keep your body alive but kill your consciousness by escaping into comfortable illusions. When you tell yourself stories about God or progress or ultimate justice that make the absurd disappear. When you decide to believe something, not because you have discovered it to be true, but because believing it makes you feel better. This is what so many philosophers have done. They have looked at the absurd, felt its weight, and then performed a leap into faith, or abstraction, or transcendence. They have said, yes, reason cannot explain existence. Therefore, I will abandon reason and embrace something beyond it. They have transformed the absurd into a springboard for God. But this is cowardice. It is intellectual dishonesty. Because you cannot decide to believe something simply because you want to. Belief is not a choice. Belief is what happens when you encounter evidence or arguments that convince you. And if you are convinced that the universe is absurd, then inventing a God to make it less absurd is just self-deception. The honest response to the absurd is not to flee from it, but to live within it, to maintain the confrontation, to refuse both physical suicide and philosophical suicide, to say, I see the absurd clearly, I accept that there is no escape, and I will live anyway. This is what I mean by revolt. Revolt is a strange word for what I am describing, but it is the right word. Because what I am proposing is a rebellion against the terms of existence. Not a rebellion that thinks it can win, but a rebellion that continues precisely because it knows it cannot win. It is like standing up to a tyrant who has absolute power. You know you will be crushed. You stand up anyway, because your consciousness demands it. This revolt has several characteristics. First, it is lucid. It does not lie to itself about the situation. It sees clearly that the universe is indifferent, that death is final, that meaning is constructed, not discovered. It does not hide behind hope or faith or distraction. It looks directly at what is. Second, it is constant. It is not a momentary gesture, but a permanent attitude. Every day you wake up, and the absurd is still there. Every day you must choose again to continue, to care, to act. The revolt is not a single dramatic act, but a patient, stubborn persistence. Third, it is without hope. This is crucial. Hope, as I use the word, means the expectation that things will get better, that meaning will arrive, that the absurd will be resolved. But revolt knows that things will not get better in any ultimate sense. The rock will keep rolling down. The plague will return. Death will come. Revolt continues anyway, not because it hopes for victory, but because continuing is itself the point. Fourth, revolt is personal, but implies solidarity. When you revolt against the absurd in your own life, you are also revolting on behalf of all conscious beings, because we all face the same silence. We are all condemned to the same mortality. We are all asking the same unanswerable questions. So in choosing to live despite the absurd, you are affirming the value of consciousness itself. You are saying that being aware, being present, being human, is worth the suffering it entails. Now, this revolt gives rise to a particular kind of freedom, not the freedom to do whatever you want without consequences, not the freedom of unlimited possibility, but the freedom that comes from having nothing left to lose. Because, if the universe does not care about you, then it also does not control you. If there is no cosmic plan, then there is no path you are required to follow. If there is no ultimate meaning, then you are free to create your own meanings moment by moment. Think about what constrains most people. They feel they should be doing something other than what they are doing. They feel they should be working towards some grand purpose. They feel they should be becoming someone better, achieving something more significant, leaving some lasting legacy. And this feeling of should chains them to an imagined future that never arrives. They are never satisfied with the present, because they are always measuring it against some ideal. But if you accept the absurd, these shoulds lose their power, because you realize they were never based on anything real. They were based on the assumption that the universe has a plan for you, that there is a correct way to live, that some authority is judging your choices. Once you see that the universe has no plan and no judge, you are freed from these imaginary obligations. This does not mean you become selfish or hedonistic. It means you become responsible in a new way. Because now your choices are truly yours. You cannot blame God or society or circumstances for the life you are living. You are creating your life moment by moment through your choices, and those choices are not justified by any external standard. They are justified only by your decision to make them. This is a terrifying freedom. Most people do not want this much responsibility. They want to be told what to do, what to value, what to become. They want the universe to give them a script, but the universe is silent, and in that silence, you must write your own script. This is the price of absurd consciousness. You cannot go back to sleep. You cannot pretend someone else is responsible. You must choose, and you must live with your choices. But this freedom also has a quality that is deeply attractive. It is the freedom of complete presence. Because if you are not living for some future reward, if you are not trying to earn something from the universe, then you can fully experience what is happening now. You can taste your food without thinking about your diet plan. You can have a conversation without worrying about the impression you are making. You can take a walk without needing it to be productive or meaningful. You can simply be here, in this moment, fully and completely. This brings me to another crucial aspect of absurd philosophy. In the absence of a hierarchy of meaning, the question becomes, how do you decide what to do with your time? And my answer is, choose quantity over quality. Choose more over better. Choose richness of experience over depth of significance. Let me explain what I mean. Most people are taught to think in terms of what is most meaningful, what is the most important career, what is the most profound relationship, what is the most valuable way to spend your time. But these questions assume there is some cosmic standard of importance that you can discover and align yourself with. The absurd response is different. It says, since nothing has inherent meaning, all experiences are equal in that sense. Therefore, live as much as possible. Experience as much as possible. Be present to as many moments as possible. Do not worry about whether what you are doing is ultimately significant. Worry only about whether you are fully alive while doing it. This is why I value passion, intensity, presence above all else. Because these are the markers of being fully conscious, fully engaged with the immediate reality of your existence. When you are passionate about something, you are not thinking about whether it matters to the universe. You are simply absorbed in the experience itself. And this absorption is what life is actually made of. Think about the times when you have felt most alive. Were you thinking about meaning? Were you worried about significance? Or were you simply completely present in the moment, playing music, making love, having an intense conversation, creating something with your hands, pushing your body to its limits? These moments of complete presence are what make life worth living, not because they add up to some grand purpose, but because they are themselves the purpose. This is what I mean when I say the absurd person lives without appeal. Without appeal to God, to history, to progress, to any external justification. They live for the sake of living. And in this simple, radical choice, they find a richness that those who wait for meaning never experience. But I want to be clear about something. This embrace of quantity and intensity does not mean reckless hedonism. It does not mean pursuing pleasure without regard for consequences. Because you still exist in a world with other conscious beings, and your consciousness recognizes solidarity with them. You cannot pursue your own intensity at the cost of creating suffering for others, because that would be a betrayal of your own revolt. Remember, the plague doctor. He does not abandon his patients in order to experience more of life. He recognizes that reducing their suffering is itself a form of intensity and presence. That caring for others is itself a way of being fully alive. The absurd does not make you selfish. It makes you responsible for creating values that your consciousness can respect. So what values emerge from absurd consciousness? First, the value of consciousness itself. If the confrontation with the absurd requires consciousness, then consciousness is valuable. Anything that diminishes consciousness lies. Self-deception, willful ignorance, cruel indifference to suffering is to be rejected. Anything that enhances consciousness, honesty, lucidity, solidarity, passion is to be embraced. Second, the value of revolt, the refusal to surrender to the absurd by either killing yourself or lying to yourself. The stubborn persistence in living fully despite knowing that nothing ultimate is at stake. This revolt is not just a philosophical position but a lived attitude. It shows up in how you face difficulty, how you respond to injustice, how you continue when everything seems pointless. Third, the value of freedom. Not freedom as the absence of constraints, but freedom as the acceptance of responsibility. You are free because the universe does not tell you what to do. And this freedom means you are responsible for creating a life you can be present to without shame or regret. Fourth, the value of the present moment. If there is no ultimate future to be earned, then the present is all you have. This does not mean ignoring practical concerns or living without planning. It means not sacrificing the reality of now for the fantasy of later. It means being here, fully, as much as possible. Fifth, the value of human solidarity. You are not alone in facing the absurd. Every conscious being faces it. And in this shared confrontation, there is a basis for compassion, for mutual support, for collective revolt. You cannot escape the absurd by yourself, but you can face it together. And there is something deeply moving about the sight of human beings continuing to care for each other despite knowing that all of it is temporary. These values are not handed down from heaven. They emerge from the logic of absurd consciousness itself, and they provide a sufficient basis for living a full, engaged, meaningful life, where meaningful is understood correctly, not as conforming to cosmic purpose, but as rich with presence and intensity and honest connection. Now I want to shift from principles to practice, because all of this philosophy means nothing if it does not change how you actually live. So let me give you some concrete ways to embody absurd consciousness in your daily life. First, practice morning lucidity. Each morning when you wake, before you reach for your phone, before you start planning your day, before you fall into routine, ask yourself one question. Why am I choosing to live today? Not as an existential crisis, but as an existential clarity. What is real in your life today? What can you be present to? What will you care about? And here is what is important. Your answer does not need to be grand or cosmic. It can be, I want to drink coffee and feel the warmth of the cup in my hands. I want to see my friend and hear them laugh. I want to work on this project because it absorbs my attention. I want to walk outside and feel the air on my skin. These are real answers. These are honest answers. And they are enough. The point is not to find the ultimate reason to live. The point is to name something concrete and real that you are choosing to be present to today. Because most people live on autopilot. They wake up and go through the motions without ever asking themselves what they are actually choosing. But if you are going to revolt against the absurd, you must choose consciously. Every day. Again and again. Second, learn to recognize and reject false consolations. Pay attention to the times when you catch yourself thinking, everything will make sense eventually, or this suffering must have a purpose, or there is a reason this is happening. These thoughts are understandable. They are attempts to make the absurd disappear, but they are also forms of self-deception. When you notice these thoughts, pause, acknowledge them, and then gently but firmly let them go. Replace them with, this may never make sense, and I will live anyway. Or, this suffering has no cosmic purpose, but I can choose how I respond to it. Or, there is no reason this is happening, which means I am free to decide what to do about it. This is not easy. Your mind will want to create meaning, to find patterns, to believe in justice. But every time you catch yourself doing this and choose lucidity instead, you strengthen your capacity for absurd consciousness. You train yourself to live without appeal. Third, return to your senses. The absurd is an abstraction. The world is concrete. When you find yourself lost in thoughts about meaninglessness, when the weight of existence feels crushing, bring yourself back to immediate sensory experience. What do you see right now? What do you hear? What do you feel on your skin? What do you taste or smell? The body is always in the present. The body never worries about ultimate meaning. The body is hungry or satisfied, tired or energized, uncomfortable or at ease. And these immediate physical realities are not absurd. They are simply what is. Use them as anchors. Let them remind you that before philosophy, before meaning, before any of these questions there is simply existence. And existence is not nothing. This is not escapism. This is not avoiding the absurd by hiding in sensation. It is balancing the abstract recognition of meaninglessness with the concrete reality of being alive. You need both. The lucidity to see clearly and the presence to feel fully. Do not get so lost in thought that you forget you have a body, a location, a lived experience. Fourth, and perhaps most important, act without guarantee. Choose one thing that matters to you, not because it will last, not because it will be remembered, not because it serves some grand purpose, but simply because it matters to you now. Create something, help someone. Learn something, build something, express something, and do it knowing that it may fail, knowing that it may be forgotten, knowing that in 100 years or 1,000 years, no trace of it will remain. Do it anyway, because the act itself is the point, because you are Sisyphus pushing the rock, because you are the plague doctor treating patients, because you are the condemned man noticing the light through the window. This is how you make meaning, not by discovering it, but by creating it through action, not by waiting for permission from the universe, but by giving yourself permission through choice. Every time you act without guarantee, you are asserting your freedom. You are revolting against the absurd. You are living. And here is what you will discover if you do this consistently: that life becomes richer, not poorer. That removing the burden of ultimate meaning does not make things empty, it makes them more vivid. Because you are no longer filtering everything through the question of whether it matters cosmically. You are simply here, doing this, feeling this, choosing this. And that direct contact with reality is more satisfying than any promise of eternal significance. Think about a child playing. They are not worried about whether their game has meaning. They are simply absorbed in it. They are building a sandcastle, knowing it will be washed away. They are pretending to be something they are not, fully aware it is pretend. And they are having a wonderful time. Not because they have found ultimate meaning, but because they have forgotten to look for it. They are simply present. The absurd asks you to recover this capacity for presence, not by becoming childish, but by becoming wise enough to know that presence is all there is. That the question of ultimate meaning is the wrong question. That the real question is, are you here? Are you alive? Are you choosing? Now, as we near the end of our time together, I want to speak to you about what all of this adds up to. About what kind of life emerges when you fully embrace absurd consciousness. Because I do not want you to walk away thinking this is just another philosophy, just another set of ideas to consider. This is a way of living, and it produces a specific kind of person. The absurd person is marked by certain qualities. First, they are honest. Brutally, uncomfortably honest. Not in a cruel way, but in a clear, seeing way. They do not lie to themselves about their situation. They do not pretend things are other than they are. They look at reality without flinching and accept what they see. Second, they are present. They are not always thinking about yesterday or tomorrow. They are here, now, engaged with what is in front of them. They have trained themselves to resist the pull of regret and anxiety, and to instead inhabit the moment they are actually in. Third, they are passionate. They care deeply about things, even though they know these things do not matter to the universe. They love, they create, they fight for what they believe in. They feel intensely, not because they have forgotten the absurd, but because they remember it. Because they know this is all temporary, which makes it precious. Fourth, they are free. They do not live according to someone else's script. They do not wait for permission to live fully. They take responsibility for creating their own values and living by them. They answer to their own consciousness, not to God or society or some imagined cosmic standard. Fifth, they are in solidarity. They recognize that everyone faces the same ultimate situation, that we are all pushing rocks up mountains, that we are all trying to create meaning in a universe that offers none. And this recognition creates a bond, not sentimentality, but genuine connection. The absurd person cannot be indifferent to human suffering, because they understand that suffering from the inside. This is who you can become if you follow the path I have outlined. Not happy in some simple, unconflicted sense, but alive, lucid, present, free. These qualities do not eliminate suffering. They do not make life easy, but they make life yours. And that is something precious. I want you to imagine yourself 1 year from now. Imagine that you have taken what I have said seriously, that you have practiced morning lucidity, rejected false consolations, returned to your senses, acted without guarantee, that you have slowly, patiently trained yourself in absurd consciousness. What will be different? You will wake up, and instead of feeling dread at another meaningless day, you will feel curiosity about what you will choose to be present to. You will have difficult experiences, and instead of asking why me, why this, what is the purpose, you will simply respond. You will respond with whatever strength and creativity you possess, without needing cosmic reassurance. You will love someone knowing they will die. And this knowledge will not diminish your love but intensify it, because every moment with them becomes precious precisely because it is temporary. You will create something knowing it will not last, and you will create it anyway, with full care and attention, because the act of creating is itself meaningful to you. You will face injustice, and instead of waiting for karma or God or history to correct it, you will do what you can to correct it yourself. Not because you believe you can fix everything, but because your consciousness demands that you try. You will suffer losses and feel grief fully, without trying to make the grief mean something or serve some purpose. You will simply let yourself feel what you feel, without judgment, without story. You will have moments of joy, real, uncomplicated joy, and you will not ruin them by wondering if they will last or what they mean. You will simply be joyful, fully, in that moment. And when the moment passes, you will not cling to it or mourn it. You will simply move on to the next moment, and the next, and the next. This is what absurd consciousness offers. Not an answer to the question of meaning, but a way of living fully, despite the absence of that answer. Not comfort, but freedom. Not hope, but presence. Not illusion, but lucidity. And I want to tell you one final thing before we part. Something that I discovered only after years of living this way. Something that surprised me, which is this: once you stop looking for meaning, you find that your life becomes deeply meaningful. Not in some cosmic sense, but in the sense that matters most. It becomes meaningful to you. Every choice you make becomes significant, because you made it consciously, without coercion, without guarantee. Every moment you experience becomes valuable, because you chose to be present to it, rather than lost in thought. Every person you connect with becomes important, because you recognize in them the same consciousness, the same struggle, the same temporary existence that you have. This meaning you create is fragile. It does not exist independent of your choice to care. It will dissolve when you die. But while you are alive, while you are conscious, it is real. It is the only kind of meaning that ever was real. And it is enough. So, I want to leave you with this. You came here, asking why we keep living, looking for a reason that would justify your existence. And I have told you, there is no such reason. Life does not require justification. The universe does not need to give you permission. You are already here. You are already alive. You are already free. The question is not, why should I keep living? The question is, now that I am living, how will I live? Will you live in bad faith, pretending that meaning will arrive someday? Will you live in denial, refusing to acknowledge the absurd? Will you live in despair, paralyzed by the absence of cosmic purpose? Or will you live in revolt, creating your own meaning through conscious choice, moment by moment, day by day? I have chosen revolt, and in that choice, I have found something that hope never gave me. I have found presence. I have found freedom. I have found the ability to look at this temporary, fragile, inexplicable existence and say, yes, I see you for what you are. And I choose you anyway. You are not broken. You are simply taught to seek what does not exist. You are told that life needs justification, that your existence requires cosmic approval. that meaning is something to be found rather than created. These are lies. Comfortable lies, but lies nonetheless. The truth is simpler and harder. The universe is silent. It offers you no explanation, no purpose, no reassurance. And this silence is not your enemy. It is your liberation, because in that silence, you discover that you have always been free, that you have always been responsible, that you have always been the source of whatever meaning your life contains. So if this resonates with you, if you feel something shift inside as you hear these words, then you know what to do. Stop waiting for the universe to give you answers. Stop looking for some external authority to tell you how to live. Stop postponing your life until conditions are ideal or meaning becomes clear. Just live. Live lucidly. Live intensely. Live presently. Create meaning through your choices. Revolt against the absurd by refusing to be defeated by it. Be Sisyphus, pushing the rock up the mountain, aware of its futility, choosing to continue anyway. Be the condemned man, noticing the light through the window. Be the plague doctor, healing the sick for no reason other than that you can. And when the doubts come, and they will come, when the weight of meaninglessness feels crushing, when you find yourself asking again, what is the point? Remember this: the point is not to have a point. The point is to be fully alive while you are alive. The point is to be conscious, present, honest, free. The point is the living itself. You are Sisyphus. The rock will roll down. You know this. You have always known this. And tomorrow morning, you will wake up, and you will choose to push it again. Not because you are foolish, not because you have found some secret meaning that makes it worthwhile, but because you are alive, because you are conscious, because you are free. And in that freedom, in that choice, in that persistent revolt against the absurd, you will find everything you were looking for, even though it is nothing like what you expected. This is why we keep living, not because we found an answer, but because we learned to stop asking the question. Not because life makes sense, but because we make life. Through our choices, through our presence, through our refusal to surrender our consciousness to comfortable lies or permanent darkness. We keep living because we choose to. And that choice, made freely and clearly and repeatedly, is the only meaning that ever was or ever will be. So go now. Live, revolt, be present, create meaning. Push your rock up the mountain, and when someone asks you why you keep living, do not give them philosophy. Do not give them arguments. Simply show them, through the way you move through the world, through the intensity with which you experience each moment, through the courage with which you face the silence. Show them that life does not need to be justified. It needs only to be lived, fully, honestly, without appeal, without hope, without illusion, but with everything you have, every single moment, until there are no moments left. And if you found something true in these words, if they resonated with something you have felt but could not name, then leave a comment. Tell me how you will live differently tomorrow. Tell me what you will choose to be present to. Tell me about your own revolt against the absurd. And if you want more of this, more truth without consolation, more lucidity without comfort, then subscribe. Not because I need you to, but because you need to remind yourself of what you have learned here. You need to hear again that you are free, that you are Sisyphus, that the rock will roll down and you will push it up again, and that in this futile, magnificent, absurd gesture you will find your freedom. The universe does not care about you, and this is the best news you will ever receive, because it means you are free to care about whatever you choose. The silence you have been dreading is actually the absence of constraint. The meaninglessness you have been fearing is actually the space where you can create your own meaning. The absurdity you have been trying to escape is actually the ground of your freedom. So stop running, turn around, face it, see it clearly, and then live. Live as you have never lived before. with nothing to lose, because you never had anything to gain, with everything to experience, because this moment is all there is, with complete freedom, because no one is watching, no one is judging, no one is keeping score. You are already free. You have always been free. You simply did not know it because you were looking for permission that you never needed. Now you know. Now you see. Now you can live. So live. Push the rock. Notice the light. Heal the sick. Love. Create. Suffer. Rejoice. Experience. Choose. Revolt. This is why we keep living, not because we found a reason, but because we are alive. And being alive, truly alive, with full consciousness and full presence and full acceptance of the absurd, this is its own justification. This is its own reward. This is everything. Go. Live. Now. Be Sisyphus. Be happy. Be free.